Hello! If you have been dealing with migraine along with a history of anxiety, join the party because nearly everybody I talk to on my free insight calls, my free migraine self-care audit calls, nearly everyone I talk to deals with anxiety as well. So hello, thanks for joining me. I'm joining on my phone today because Facebook's being weird on my computer. Hope you like my new do. I chopped off all my hair, so it's nice to live without a constant ponytail. So if you have dealt with anxiety, whether you have a diagnosis or not, you're absolutely not alone. Anxiety and depression are tied as the second most comorbid symptom condition accompanying migraine. First is insomnia. So all of these things are playing a part in the daily lives of people living with migraine. So today I'm going to talk about how you can reduce both a migraine and anxiety using similar strategies all in one fell swoop. So I'm going to talk about the ways that anxiety can exacerbate migraine and vice versa, talk about how to break the fear-pain cycle which perpetuates pain. I'm going to talk about what kinds of support and options there are for you to help you manage both your anxiety and migraine, and also the evidence that supports the use of yoga for both migraine and anxiety. So just to be super clear, my anxiety is not a cause of migraine, but it is something that can worsen symptoms. Our anxious brains can feed persistent migraine by being in a state of constant high alert, and also the migraine symptoms give our anxious brain something to constantly be preoccupied about. What's going to happen if I have a migraine attack? How am I going to get through this? How do I fix this? So it just starts to snowball in many ways. But if you do struggle with anxiety alongside migraine, I actually think this is a really good thing because there's so much that you can do to minimize your anxiety, and in doing so, it also helps to decrease your migraine symptoms. So let's jump in. First, let's talk about the prevalence of anxiety in the whole world lately. Just yesterday, the New York Times talked about how for the first time ever, a panel of medical experts recommended that doctors screen all adult patients under 65 for anxiety. So this is due to the fact that anxiety is one of the most common mood disorders, and that anxiety has increased throughout this time of the pandemic. So from August of 2020 to February of 2021, the percentage of adults who experienced recent symptoms of anxiety or depression increased to 41.5% of all Americans, up from 36.5%. So it's all increasing. That the mental health crisis in the world has definitely been increasing, and not just in the United States. Anxiety and depression, according to the New York Times article, also increased 25% globally during that first year of the pandemic, according to the World Health Organization. So I've absolutely noticed in my own clients, a lot of people felt like their migraine symptoms worsened during the pandemic, or their symptoms came out of nowhere since 2020, that they didn't have any migraine symptoms before that. So I absolutely think, just in my own observation, that this is affecting us on multiple levels. So first, let's now talk about the connection between anxiety and migraine. According to my research, 50% of people with migraine also have anxiety. So this is very common. And compared to people without migraine, people with migraine are 2 to 2.5 times more likely to have depression and 2 to 5 times more likely to have anxiety. As people's migraine attacks increase, as they become more chronic, mood symptoms also increase. Mood disorders are more common with chronic migraine. They're not absolutely sure why. At this point, there is a lot of evidence that pain pathways and emotional pathways share similar pathways in the brain. So as one gets activated, the other can also be turn on as well. So the jury's still out if anxiety predisposes someone to migraine, if it's a consequence of migraine, maybe a little bit of both. Maybe there's a shared biological underpinning. So there is still more research to be done, but it's likely that all of these conditions are probably perpetuating this relationship between anxiety and migraine. And when you're dealing with anxiety and depression, it can affect our motivation and just our ability to adhere to migraine treatment. So it affects how well our treatments are working if we're able to maintain them, and if we're struggling due to anxiety or depression. So let's go in. We will talk about how anxiety can exacerbate migraine and how migraine can exacerbate anxiety. So I've been talking a lot, so I'll take a little pause here. I love to see all these people joining me. Thank you. If you're here live, just share a little shout out. If you struggle with anxiety too, or tend to be like a little bit more disposed to being on high alert. Sometimes we don't necessarily have a formal diagnosis, but you might be someone who just runs a little more uptight, perfectionist. All these qualities can also create the same effect. So fundamentally, when you experience anxiety, it is a full body experience. It's not just something that happens in your thoughts where you're just worrying and being preoccupied. Your whole body is affected because the sympathetic response in your body, the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response is being activated. And for some people, that is like their default mode of always being on high alert, kind of ready for action, ready for danger, ready to fix things. Great to see you, Dana. It's been a while. Yeah, anxiety, GAD, PTSD with chronic migraine. You are absolutely not alone. And we'll talk about how we can start to, separate some of these knots that happen between all these mood challenges and migraine. So if you just think fundamentally, okay, the anxious response is the fight or flight response in the body. And when you experience anxiety, it doesn't have to be a huge deal. It's not always just like, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna get hit by a car and you have an anxious response. That's what it's there for. It's there to protect you. But we can start to develop anxiety for little things, because we're going to be a minute late to dropping our kids off in the morning because someone in our family responded in a way that made us worried. So there's so many ways that what we perceive as like high danger, in reality, our brain is just overreacting to a lot of stimuli, and our body can't really necessarily keep up with it. We might respond to being on stage. The threat of survival is pretty much non-existent, but we can respond in the same way as if somebody is walking behind us with a gun. I mean, the level of body sensations can be the same. And so when you experience anxiety, it can create a whole range of both mental and physical symptoms. So fight or flight, your muscles are going to tense up, your eyesight improves, your hearing improves, your digestion decreases, so you might have more stomach trouble, your neck hurts, headaches can be a symptom of anxiety. There's such a host of physical symptoms that are very individual, I'd say, much like migraine. For some people, it can make you feel restless, it's hard to sleep, but other people respond in more the freeze response, where they feel just like overwhelmed, they're exhausted when they become anxious, they kind of shut down. So your response is very individual, but the basic underlying mechanism is that your brain is perceiving danger and it is making part of you feel afraid. So as your brain kind of begins to overreact in this way, we have this protective mechanism to fight or flight or freeze. And it's something that we've learned to do to varying degrees. Sometimes our childhood, if it was more chaotic, or we had parents who wanted things a certain way, we grew to be much more on guard. Sometimes it is just our biology that we have more of a high alert system, and migraine absolutely creates more of a hyper-excitable brain. So knowing all this, knowing that it's kind of how we've learned to operate in the world to protect ourselves. Our brain's trying to protect us from danger. It's just that our brain doesn't always get it right. It can be hyperactive, and we can also learn how to minimize, how to bring in our sense of danger and threat to more of a reasonable level. As our brain is overreacting to fear, as we're tense, this can intensify our pain. If you joined my call last week, I talked about some of the ways that pain happens in the body, and it always starts with our brain's interpretation of danger. When our interpretation of danger is low, our pain is generally lower. When our brain thinks, oh my gosh, this is a serious situation, like I need to protect myself from harm, our pain goes up to motivate us to change. And that's what the pain's there for. So when your brain is like always looking for danger and finding danger, and that it's reinforcing this fear and pain cycle, that's often when our pain and our migraine pain, for example, begins to chronify. It perpetuates, where we perhaps feel some head pain, and then that head pain brings us back to, oh no, what's going to happen tomorrow if I have a migraine attack? How am I going to function? It starts to create these anxious thoughts. The anxious thoughts perpetuate the fear, which perpetuate the pain, and it can create this feedback loop that helps to only intensify our pain and anxiety. Also, the migraine pain and the migraine itself gives our brain something to preoccupy about nonstop. It is just a perpetual fountain of things to be worried about. Whether we are constantly trying to limit triggers in our environment, whether we're trying to solve our migraine, we're going to a zillion specialists, we're reading everything on Facebook groups about how to deal with migraine, whether we're controlling, whether we're worrying about our future and how migraine is going to affect our future, whether we are ruminating about the past and all the things we used to be able to do, all of this is like feeding the preoccupation. So from the pain reprocessing therapy approach, so much of it is this idea that often it's not a chronic pain problem that people have, it's a preoccupation problem. That chronic pain is just offering a non-stop fuel to the preoccupation. And so let's now talk about how to break this fear-pain cycle. If you're joining me, I'd love to hear anything questions you have, any aha moments. This is a lot, and it's definitely a way to change the way we think about how our thoughts, and not just our anxious thoughts, but how that physical change that it creates in our body, how it can exacerbate migraine. So if you want to share a few ahas, love to hear from you. So let's talk about how to break the fear and pain cycle, how to get out of this rut of the anxiety, the anxious thoughts, the anxious body contributing to more migraine symptoms. This is absolutely one of the main focuses of what I do in my work, teaching yoga for migraine, working with pain reprocessing therapy with my clients in Beyond Migraine. So it is something that once you understand the reasoning behind it, then you can start implementing it. But understanding it first is the step to begin with, of course. All right, let's talk about it. So often when we're in a state of persistent chronic pain, persistent migraine, our brain has changed. Literally, the brain pathways, you can see changes in the brain when someone has developed chronic pain. So in how we experience that, your brain can feel like it's always on high alert, like you're always bracing for impact. You're always ready for the next migraine attack. It's hard to let your guard down. This is that heightened state of like arousal, of being on fight or flight constantly, which can perpetuate the chronic pain and the chronic stress, right? This is not a positive place to live in. The healthy response is to have times of fight or flight when we need to protect ourselves, and then to be able to go back into parasympathetic rest and digest. So to get out of the fear and pain cycle, it's learning to change your brain's habits from high alert to a sense of more easeful, more resilience. So how do you do that? How do you change your brain from getting more and more susceptible to chronic pain? So thankfully, even though there's changes in the brain, when you develop chronic pain, those changes are not permanent, and you can learn how to reverse them. So one of the main ways is really to simply increase your parasympathetic response, your rest and digest response, to practice that regularly. In my humble opinion, yoga is incredibly effective at doing that, of eliciting the relaxation response, so that you're, one, comfortable being relaxed when you are so used to being anxious. It's uncomfortable for many people at first to feel relaxed. So first you just got to get used to that as a new state of being, used to allowing your guard to be down, to experiencing the changes that happen in your body when you are eliciting the parasympathetic response. Your breath slows down, you have less tension in your body, your digestion starts to improve again, you're feeling like you can rest. So when you're able to integrate rest and digest parasympathetic experiences into your daily life more regularly, this can help to break that anxious state that so many of us kind of get locked into. So that's a big reason why I work with my clients to implement a daily 30-minute yoga practice, because yoga is so good at helping you turn that relaxation switch on in your body, decrease your muscle tension. And then from the pain reprocessing therapy approach, there's absolutely a whole slew of strategies, of concepts. You can work with a private one-on-one counselor to do this. I work with my clients in a group setting to do pain reprocessing therapy practices. But the idea is that you are learning how to respond to the physical sensations in your body, typically pain, but it could be dizziness, it could be fatigue, and learning to respond to them from with more safety rather than fear, so that you can experience head pain starting to develop in your head. You don't have to run from it. You don't have to push through it. You don't have to get preoccupied about what next. You can just learn to be with it and be okay with it. And it sounds very simplistic, but it takes practice, because our brain's gotten habituated to kind of freak out when we experience what feels like a migraine attack brewing. And Dana, great to hear you're continuing your yoga, breathwork, and meditation practice. Absolutely. These are so essential, and it's individual. It's really what works for you to feel like relaxed, regulated. Yoga is my go-to. I absolutely feel so much better when I keep up my regular yoga practice, in terms of feeling calmer, having less muscle tension, having less migraine. So there's lots of doors to the same experience of feeling safe, feeling relaxed, And in terms of, these are all very like physical practices and somatic practices that I think are so important when we get lost in anxiety. But also, like, you can work with your thoughts as well and become aware of what preoccupying thoughts arise when you feel head pain, for example. Whether you start to ruminate about, oh, I used to be able to do this, now I can't. Oh, what's the rest of my day going to be like? Whether you're trying to solve the problem of what to do, and just starting to observe them and not buy into them. All of it takes practice. And that is really what I help my clients do, is like keep these practices, whether it's yoga, responding to your pain with messages of safety, using somatic tracking. It's that dailiness that is going to make the difference. Just like learning an instrument, learning a language, you gotta just do it and repeat it until the brain learns a new way. And that's what I help my folks do in Beyond Migraine. So we'll wrap up with what kinds of support are available if you are dealing with anxiety, and some of the research and evidence supporting the use of yoga for both anxiety and migraine. If any of these options of what I do with either practicing yoga on your own, using some of my on-demand programs sounds interesting, whether you're interested to learn more about my group coaching programs that help you implement all of what we're talking about, you can send me a DM anytime. You can type in the comments, learn more, and I'll get back to you. I'm happy to share resources, whatever your budget is. And I have so many free resources in the Yoga for Migraine Facebook group. But if you really are ready for, like, I want my migraine, I want to be a thing of the past, I want to get through this, I want to do this quickly, then the coaching programs are absolutely the fastest way to make that transformation. All right, so what can you do to help decrease anxiety? If you have a diagnosis, or even if you suspect that this is something that you're struggling with, I am a huge fan of counseling. I work with a counselor regularly myself. Psychiatric medication can be a game changer for people living with anxiety and or depression, and just witnessing the impact of psychiatric medication on some people in my family and seeing the difference it makes in their quality of life. Like, I don't judge. I think it's a really important treatment option for so many people, that especially that don't respond to other things. It doesn't have to be a last resort either. But also supplementing some of these more conventional practices with your mindfulness practices, with physical exercise. These are all going to help boost your resilience. It's going to decrease your anxiety, and it's likely going to decrease your migraine symptoms in kind, because as we talked about, the fear, the muscle tension, all of this perpetuates the increase of migraine symptoms. In terms of what I offer for support, absolutely, the more that you practice yoga, I help my clients practice 30 minutes a day to really feel benefit without feeling like you have to practice hours a day. That is a great goal. And I have on-demand programs for practicing migraine-friendly yoga. Pain reprocessing therapy is an amazing approach that I'm also certified in, and you can work with me in my group program, but you can also find psychotherapists that are trained in this modality as well, and really work like more specifically on your pain and how you respond to it. So I highly recommend that approach. And then finally, Beyond Migraine, we kind of work on it on all angles, on migraine specifically, community aspect with how we work together as a group, understanding some of our tendencies towards anxiety and how we can start to shift them. So I'll leave you with some of the evidence that shows how yoga can benefit both anxiety and migraine. Oh, Carolyn, thank you for your sweet comment. She wrote, Beyond Migraine with Adrienne has transformed my life. Love you, Carolyn. Thank you for shouting out. So for yoga and anxiety, that definitely has much more research done behind it than migraine. Migraine, despite how many people in the world suffer with migraine, it still has very little research and funding for research. But anxiety has a considerable amount of research behind it for yoga. And according to this awesome book I have, Does Yoga Work? This author goes through like tons of research on everything yoga related for every different kind of health condition, and she's incredibly thorough at really like assessing the data, multiple papers, and according to her analysis and looking at studies and meta-analyses, yoga can be a very helpful adjunct therapy for anxiety, but it may not be enough to treat those with like a formal diagnosis of anxiety or be a standalone treatment. So it's like a supportive, complementary approach to anxiety, but you probably need some other support and treatment besides only yoga. In terms of migraine, there's kind of like just a handful of studies. Hopefully I'll one day be on the forefront of bringing more research to yoga and migraine. But what I love is I found someone passed on to me a more recent article from 2022 in the Journal of Clinical Neuroscience, where they did a meta-analysis, which means they kind of looked at multiple studies of random controlled studies, about 350 patients. And from this study, from analyzing all these other studies, they found that overall, compared with a control group for migraine, yoga therapy was associated with substantially reduced headache frequency. So yay for some more evidence coming out supporting that regular yoga practice can decrease frequency. Another study from 2020 showed it decreased the frequency and medication use by nearly half. So hopefully more research will come our way in the coming years, but drop some of your ahas, your connections of how anxiety might be affecting your life, your migraine. If you notice how some of your thoughts about migraine perhaps start to snowball, if you feel that your migraine symptoms intensify when you're stressed out. These are kind of like low-grade forms of anxiety. When you feel more stress, right? You're feeling like more high alert. You're feeling like there's a lot of fires to put out. There's more danger. So anxiety isn't experienced like big A anxiety. You know, we have that kind of low-level anxiety as well. It is a very common epidemic in the whole world, especially since COVID. So you're not alone if you've been dealing with this. And so if you're interested to learn more about how I help people decrease anxiety, decrease migraine, live a life that feels more open, more free, feel free to DM me, feel free to drop it in the comments. I want to learn more. And I've got everything from on-demand programs you can do on your own to incredibly guided and comprehensive group coaching programs to help you feel better and feel calmer as well. So great to have so many people join me live. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.